Okay, welcome everybody. Good to see you all to the Tales from the Jar Side live stream, which I sometimes refer to as Tales from Developers. I'm not consistent about any of these things. I'm not great about branding, etc. But the good news is we are joined by a very interesting developer, my good friend Jonathan Johnson. Now, do you prefer Jonathan or do you prefer John? I'd never remember.
I get that question all the time. And 3 syllables for Jonathan, 1 syllable for John. So, I kind of feel like I don't want to impose 3 syllables on somebody. If you want to call me John, that's fine. So, but I respond to both. And I respond to other things too when I shouldn't be. But
I've met some Jonathans who didn't want to be called John. And I knew one John who didn't have put an H in his name, which I always thought was strange. I mean, I understand if it's short for Jonathan,
right.
But just a regular John.
Yeah. Well, the only thing, it's really weird because my last name is Johnson. So when I say something, I'll say Jonathan Johnson on the phone. And you'll be like, Jonathan? No. Jonathan Johnson. Right. Johnson. No.
So, have you seen this, by the way? I got to do my little quick intro. Okay, ready? 5 seconds. Here we go. It didn't go. Wait. I hit the wrong button. Figures. Let's try again. Here we go. Isn't that nice?
I love the guitar riff. It's great.
That's Canva, and I don't remember which riff it was. I pulled out of there. Okay, now that people can see the Rage Against the Machine Learning t-shirt, it's time to zoom in a little bit. There we go.
And I have just a black shirt of nondescript black shirt with a black background. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it was for effect because I actually have to tell you, I don't know if I have time to show it, but I was doing a JUnit class yesterday. And normally when I teach JUnit, I don't use Java 17. I use like 11 or something like that. And I was using 17 in this workshop. And one of the, the tests with the parameterized test, the tests where you could run the same test with different arguments each time.
Yep.
Apparently, one of the sources you could use as a CSV source is a text block. Text blocks became final in either Java 14 or 15, but I didn't use them in the class normally because I don't expect people to be on Java 17. So I tried putting in a text block and I was putting my code in and it was only running one test. It wasn't running all of them. I had like 3 or 4 lines. Maybe I think I reduced it down to 2 lines, but it was still only running one test. And I couldn't figure out why. And you know how it is in class when you can't figure it out with everybody staring at you, doing it right there. So I said, look, I don't want to solve it on your time. I'll fix it as soon as we're done. So after class, I did this. Now you're familiar. You heard about the IntelliJ offering their AI assistant now. Have you heard about this?
Yep. That's wonderful. Yeah.
So I downloaded and installed the EAP version. I'm usually using the release version, but the only way to get that AI assistant is with the EAP version. So I asked the EAP version, I asked the AI assistant, hey, I'm trying to do this test with the text block and it's not running both tests. It's only running one. So what's going on? And it's just ChatGPT with the serial numbers filed off, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I ask it, and first of all, I thought that the integration with IntelliJ would be, I'll highlight the code, I'll ask it a question, it'll answer it. No. You have to actually copy the code and paste it into the little chat window. It'll escape it for you. It'll wrap it in 3 quotes, 3 backticks with the word Java, so it renders it correctly. But you still have to paste it in there. And it said, oh, yeah, you really need to do it this way. Oh, Ryan's here. Excellent. Hey, Ryan, Good to see you. Ryan Vanderwerf is Texas-based, as I recall. I'm pretty sure Austin. If I get that wrong, let me know. But Ryan, I've met for years on the Groovy side, by the way. He was very active in the Groovy community.
Nice.
At any rate, I pasted in the code and I asked the AI assistant, what do I do with this? What's going wrong? And it said, oh, yeah, you want to do it this way. And it changed the text block back to an array, which I already knew how to do.
Right.
And I said, no, I want to do it with a text block. Yeah, I bet. I've heard they're having a real heat wave in Texas this week. It's just monstrous. I've heard
overnight.
That.
Yeah.
Just awful.
Yeah.
I think it's going to hit us in the next couple of days, but
Yep.
not like there.
Yep.
There. We're going to get some of it. So I said to the AI assistant, I said, no, I want to do a text block. And it went, oh, you have to set this delimiter property, or you could specify it with a custom delimiter. And it suggested a property that didn't exist. Because when I tried to put it in, it went, oh yeah, no, this story has a happy ending. Don't worry, it's coming. So I tried putting in that delimiter, and then I had to go back to the AI tool and say, that property doesn't exist in CSV source. And it said, oh yeah, I'm sorry. You know how it always apologizes profusely every single time? That's another reason, it's ChatGPT, that's what's going on. And it came back and said, well, here, try it this way by embedding \n, put in the actual carriage returns in there, which of course you don't have to do. And that didn't fix anything. And then it complained that I was putting in a local date without parsing it. And I said, no, that's okay, as long as you put in the right string form. And then it said, well, okay, you could do it this way. And it turned it into a method source where it parsed it itself. And at which point I go, it has no idea what to do here. So I did what I should have done all along. I went to the GitHub repository and found the test class for parameterized tests, parameterized source or whatever.
Yep.
And you know what I was doing wrong? I was putting in the text block as value equals or nothing, because nothing's the same as value equals. And instead it has to be text block equals.
Yep.
They actually put in a special parameter. Even though it's just a regular string, they put in a parameter called text block.
Right.
When I changed it to text block, it worked immediately.
Yep.
So the AI tool was no help at all.
Well, it's interesting. The AI tool doesn't have there's no facial expression that you can read. When somebody's BSing you, you kind of know, you don't know what you're really talking about, do you? You're like, you can read their face. But with chat, they'll give you an answer. And it's no different than 100% confidence answer and a 20% confidence answer. Yeah. And that's what I think is missing from this, is like some kind of a meter saying like, here's my suggestion, but I'm like way over here in terms of confidence. And it doesn't give you that. Although, in the background, it's available. They're just not presenting it to us. And I think it's weird because we're being cultured into this, understanding this persona that is this chat persona. And we're starting to develop the BS factor. And we're creating our own way of measuring it. And it's not good. I don't know.
It also, I would say it lies, but it doesn't lie, because lying would assume that it understood what it was saying.
Or it's malicious.
What it does is it tells you the answer it thinks you want to hear, whatever that may be, which may have no bearing on reality. The part that I didn't understand until recently is it doesn't even understand its own capabilities. Like I can ask it, can you do this? And it will say no, and yet it can, or the other way around. Oh, by the way, before we go any further, what's your website? Is it just dijure.com?
dijure.com.
Yeah. Let's put this. How about that? See, is that it?
That is it.
How about that?
Awesome.
I meant to do that. However, let's edit this and make it. How about this? Isn't that better?
Wow.
Oh,
good. Breaking news.
Pardon me?
Breaking news.
Yeah, exactly. Which again is about as much breaking as, but yeah, these AI assistants, I think I told you the story where I had to take a video and generate the transcript from it so that it could read the transcript and tell me something about it. And then I accidentally pasted in the URL for the video instead of the transcript. And it went, yeah, sure, I can read that. And I asked it specifically, can you do that? And then went, no.
And then you call it out on it. And then it says, oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I mean, except because every time you call it out on anything, it goes, oh, I'm terribly sorry. Or it always apologizes before it doubles down on the wrong answer.
Exactly. With no meter. Like, what's your BS factor?
So, all right, you were going to talk about, I don't know. A lot of people probably, you don't have as big a public presence as you might otherwise have. So why don't you give all of our listener No, it could be plural for all I know. Some idea where you're coming from.
Yeah,
What are you
where
doing?
I come from. I live in Connecticut with you.
Yeah.
We're Ken and I are in the same nutmeg state. We call ourselves nutmakers, halfway in between one team and baseball team in Boston, the other baseball team in New York that we won't mention. But yeah,
You're
we're
not a
right there.
Yankee fan, are you?
Well, all Connecticut people, you never know what fan they are because they switch because it all depends upon what side of the Connecticut River you're on.
I'm
And
assuming you have a soul.
well, I grew up in Cheshire, and I've been mostly on the west side of Connecticut, and I have been known to go to a Yankee game
Well,
in
you
the
can
past.
go. You don't have to root for them. I mean, that's deep evil. There's levels of I mean, I'm not happy with my Red Sox at
Well,
all. I'm still angry about the Mookie Betts trade. I mean, they gave away Mookie Betts for nothing just because they didn't want to pay him. And I'm like, you got the second highest payroll in baseball. Don't give me this nonsense, And I haven't forgiven him for that. But that doesn't mean I'm going to root for the Yankees. I'd
right,
still like to believe there is good in this world, and
right,
there's certainly evil in this world, and they're one of them.
right.
Anyway, go ahead. You
Anyways, where
live
am I?
down in
Yeah. So I grew up in
you're
Connecticut,
outside
and
New Haven, right?
I've been in Connecticut around the New Haven area for a long, long time, and doing software for I don't know 40 years now, almost. Um, and it various companies and things like that in this season of my life. You call it seasons, I don't know, whatever season that is. I've been doing a lot more with presentations and training and teaching and mentoring and getting into that concept. And that started by meeting like personalities like Mark Richards, and I know you had Nate on last week. We're all friends, and I've gotten to know a bunch of you from the tour, the No Fluff Just Stuff tour, and things like that. And that's how I met Ken.
That's probably how I met Ryan. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, although you had Josh Long on. I think I met Josh one time. He was at ArtConf or something like that. But I don't know him that well, but there's overlapping circles between many of us. So yeah, I'm another speaker on that tour, as well as some other speakers, and I do a lot of things with O'Reilly now, and mostly concentration in the last couple of years on cloud native computing with specifically Kubernetes. Sure, containers, but I'm more interested in the ideas of distributed computing, parallel computing, and running these, architecting those applications on large cloud systems. And it doesn't really matter where, right? Whether it's on Azure or Google or AWS or on your laptop. I'm more interested in this idea of distributed computing and the tools that are available now to make that much more approachable for software developers.
Well,
So I'm always concerned about
go ahead.
the teaching aspect of it in terms of getting people to relax about it and saying, look, it's really not that hard. There are some things you need to learn. And yes, there is a learning curve to this, but this new tool into the toolbox is well worth the time to invest in, because, when I arrive at an airport and you pull out the phone and you're like, I need to go from the airport to the hotel, there's a lot of magic there. And the magic is that, a lift system is taking you from the airport to the hotel based on Kubernetes. And there's people that, use and write software for this all the time. And these are commercial successful applications. So I really love taking somebody who knows how to do like Java development and to say, look, you know how to write a Java application. Here's how to take that Java application and then get it into a container and then into a web service, and then get it running on the cloud, so that you can start thinking about how to architect applications that are more like, what Uber is, or LinkedIn, or other popular platforms. Not that everybody in our audience is always going to be working at those very large companies. There's lots of smaller type of applications in terms of public awareness, but in many enterprise applications, there's always an opportunity to say, how can I bring this to cloud native development?
Well, let me ask the beginner question, because my experience with containers is limited. I'm much more on the dev side of DevOps. I never was really comfortable with the ops side. And the first time I really went, I really got to do this Docker stuff is when the test containers project came along, because I really like the test containers project. And I have a talk on the tour on it now, but it's still, even that talk, I have to admit up front that I'm not the expert on deployment and all this stuff. I just want to show how to use it. But Kubernetes is a whole nother level. And I have to admit, I've never used it. Just for beginners like me, if you don't mind, what's the use case? What does it do for you? Why do you want to do Kubernetes stuff?
Yeah. And maybe one of the reasons why you never had to or wanted to deal with it or play with it is because you didn't have a need. And I think that, for years I dealt with swing development. I was doing Java swings for years and years. I love that. I love doing the UI and rich desktop applications.
Right.
Never had a need for containers, never had a need for distributed computing. And then suddenly I was in a company and working on teams, and we were like, yeah, we need to break up a monolith, and have it broken up and have more people use this. We need to have scalability and fault tolerance and reliability. That's when you start needing it. It's, if you don't need distributed computing, don't do it. Because soon, the 8 fallacies of distributed computing, as soon as you put a cable, as soon as you say, hey, I've got this application, I'm going to split it into 2, and then I'm going to put an Ethernet cable in between them. Isn't that cool? You're like,
because the network cost is 0 after all, right?
Right. Why would you do that? Why would you make your life more complicated? You've just now spoiled your weekend. Now you have to learn about all the problems of having that cable between 2 important components of your application. And, as much as like I get all excited about the tooling and everything, it's like, I tell people, like, don't do this if you don't need it. If you don't need to have access to lots of CPU and lots of memory across multiple machines, and you're just more interested in saying, look, I have an application and I'm more interested in the Python algorithms in it or something like that. That's what I'm concentrating on. It's like, fine, then don't get into distributed computing.
Okay.
But as soon as you start needing one of the things I always talk about in Kubernetes is, what does an operating system do? An operating system, on a device gives you access to what? CPU memory and IO, right? So as an application developer, that's what we eat for lunch. Like, we need CPU, we need memory, and we need IO.
Okay.
Fundamentally, right? And the operating system is this magical thing that just gives it to us. Of course, there's the APIs and the drivers within, your language system du jour. But ultimately, that's what we care about as a developer, right? When you write a stream open with a try catch, there's a lot of magic underneath all that code inside of Java, and as well as in the operating system itself that you're running on. So you're just relying on it. But now you're like, CPU memory and IO. Now I need CPU memory and IO. But the box that I'm running it on, whatever that box is, or whatever that rectangle or cube is, what if there's not enough in that? I have to process 10,000 bank loans overnight in 6 hours. Well, if I just have 100 bank loans and each bank loan takes me about 10 minutes to process, you don't need distributed parallel computing. Right?
Okay.
But if you need to do 10,000 bank loans, which you do when you start getting larger and more successful, then you need more CPU, memory, and IO.
So where's Kubernetes fit into this?
Kubernetes is an operating system that gives you, the developer, CPU, memory, and IO, but you don't have to worry about where it's coming from. Right? So you've got a stack of computers, physical machines or virtual machines, which are called nodes. And each one of those nodes, of course, on it has CPU, memory, and IO. And yes, those machines have operating systems on them. But really what we want as a developer is, I want CPU, memory, and IO from any one of those machines, and I don't care which one. I don't want to care, because if I started to care about what machine it was on, that's distributing computing, and that's too hard. It's been hard for 40 years plus, and it continues to be hard. That's the other thing I say about Kubernetes is that some people will walk away from Kubernetes saying like, I don't need it. That's too much. And my argument would be like, well, I think it's not Kubernetes. It's not the tool itself. It's the fact that you don't need distributed computing. You don't need that amount of CPU, memory, and IO. Mm-hmm. And if you don't need that, you're absolutely right. You should walk away from it because it's complicated. But what Kubernetes is giving you as a tool is something that will make distributed computing easier. It doesn't make it easy; it just makes it easier.
Okay. Does it deploy containers to these various platforms? Yeah. Is that the idea?
Exactly. There's the computer science 101 bin packing algorithm, right? Remember the bin packing problem, right?
Okay.
And that's what's going on inside of Kubernetes. It's figuring out the best place to run your application. You tell it like, hey, I've got 100 microservices. I want 100 microservices out there that will process loans for me.
Uh-huh.
So what you do is you just tell Kubernetes, I want 100 of these, or I want to process X number of loans in 6 hours. Do the math on that. And that will tell you 50, 100, whatever microservices you need. What the Kubernetes does, it has a scheduler inside of it, very complicated algorithm. And it figures out, oh, okay, I got all these nodes where I can run all that stuff. And I'll run 5 here, 10 here, 20 there, 2 here, based upon the amount of CPU, memory, and IO and all those nodes. You as an application developer don't have to figure that out. Just like when you write Java code and you have an open and a try block, and you're doing all this stream, just reading a file and reading it into memory. There's a whole bunch of stuff in that code. You don't care about, you don't worry about, you just know it works. Why? Well, it's because it's baked into the operating system and it's baked into the language that you're using. That's what's going on with Kubernetes.
What's a typical example where you wound up using Kubernetes and to solve? You know what I mean? You use it all the time, right? I mean, you've done lots with it.
Yeah.
What's an example of a case that you went, oh, my answer here is to use Kubernetes?
Anytime where you need, well, okay. So,
I mean, within the bounds of whatever you're allowed to say about those projects. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen it, lots of different commercial computing applications. It's it's kind of funny because it's kind of like saying, well, what would you use Linux for?
Oh, really? It's that broad? Okay.
It's like whenever you needed the amount of CPU, memory, and IO, whenever you need more,
when's the last time you used it? I mean, I'm just looking to, what did you do? How did it work out? What did you use it for?
Yeah. Laboratory information management system was my last full-time gig. At a company.
That needs an explanation.
Yeah. So my background here in Connecticut was been like laboratory instruments, real-time data acquisition. Interesting, fun period when I got out of college. Actually, in high school and got out of college, I was doing a lot of laboratory information management systems. The Pirelli building, the old Pirelli building in New Haven. It was a tire manufacturer, and it was down in New Haven. It's right next to IKEA, and there's the old Pirelli building down there, and my software was running in that Pirelli building. Rubber testing tire industry.
Oh wow!
And that goes a ways back, but I've had always an interest in scientific computing.
Right.
Less than financial. Although
I was on the scientific part of that scientific computing back before I changed careers. My language was okay. Wait a minute. Fortran?
Yep, mine too.
Yikes. And
I got a Bill Gates story for you.
Pardon me?
I got a Bill Gates story for you.
Oh, wow. Well, we didn't do distributed anything. Sometimes we'd use what we called mini supercomputers, that nice little oxymoron there. And then there was this thing that came along called a connection machine, which was in principle distributed, but it was really just lots and lots of multiprocessors, Oh God, good old Fortran 77, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Dan's here, by the way.
Dan!
Notice that. In fact, that's how I knew I was in the wrong field. Is Fortran 90 came out, and I got all excited about it. And the other members of my team were like, "Why would you care about that? They care about the actual science, not the
Right.
code. You just write the code." You think, yeah. Any rate, so the connection machine was massively multi-parallel. That was the idea. That, and I didn't even use it. I just had another member of the team that used it because that looked complicated to me. But Kubernetes, I mean, how is that different from, say, ESBs, enterprise service bus or something like that?
Yeah.
But I don't mean to interrupt your story about the laboratory software. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it kind of ties into it. So the laboratory information management system I was kind of involved with was the idea of it was a monolith. It was built up over the years, very successful, running on Tomcat. And I don't know how much I can say about it, but it was large.
Don't worry, nobody's listening. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It was, the number of jar files that were inside the war file, it was approaching a ginormous number, and the size of it and the time it took to build it. Even if it was a modular monolith, right, the team that was involved in developing all of the different modules of it was very large. So a laboratory information management system, and there's lots of information management systems out there, and the basic idea of it is like, 3-tier system. You got a UI, you can come to a back end, and then you got some kind of a database, Oracle database, something like that, right?
Okay.
But the idea of monolith to microservices, right, the Sam Newman book, breaking up your monolith to microservices, building microservices, he's got 2 books on that, is the idea of architecturally breaking down your monolith into smaller pieces into the business features that you need. So in the laboratory management system, there was something like there was a billing system, and there was a chemistry system, different business features, right? Inventory systems and things like that, right? Okay. And of course, there's testing and your projects that you're working on, and you're gathering all the data and the test results from all the various instruments, and there's instrument management and calibration of your instruments, and so all of that is managed in the software. It's a whole realm into itself, and the reason I talked about it was because way back in Fortran 77 years, when I first started my career, in my office with my mentor, he had a VAX system. And the VAX was Fortran with the big platters. And they were writing one of the first laboratory information management systems that was available in the world. And then, 20 years later, I was working at a, Tomcat Java team that was doing laboratory information management systems. So I got into the idea of architecting, modularizing that, and doing Kubernetes with that.
Okay.
Breaking it up. So taking those business features, those modules within the laboratory management system, identifying them, carving them out, high cohesion, low coupling, modular components, and then spoiling my weekend and saying, oh, okay, now I'm going to run it on multiple computers, and we're going to have a cable between all these things.
Right.
Thus, you get into something like, well, how are we going to do all that? How are we going to orchestrate that? Well, that's why you get into container orchestration with Kubernetes. Why would you need that? It's because you need the scaling, the fault tolerance. You have a larger user base. You might have a cluster where you have a subscription base. So you can take a laboratory information management system and say, okay, DuPont, here's a laboratory information system for you. And then they can run with it. But you could also have, say, you've got 50 startups in the Cambridge area all doing life sciences laboratories. They don't want to pay for a large laboratory system. So you could do a subscription base. Right. Where do you run all that? You run on the cloud. You let them log in and do their inventory management on that, and experiment management on that. So that case where you start needing the massive scaling, lots of users using the same microservices, but for their individual data needs.
Now, when you teach this stuff on O'Reilly, right? I mean, or other places.
Yeah.
You teach this stuff all over the place.
Whenever I can.
Yeah. So what kind of infrastructure do you use to teach it? I mean, do you need to set up an example? Do you access the cloud? What do you normally use?
Yeah, normally, I love the hands-on, and I love having developers who know Java to use it. And the last thing I want to get involved with is like having them take out their credit card and start paying, some cloud fees.
Right.
And the same, it's like teaching Latin, right? You can speak Latin anywhere. Well, all right. So you can take language X, right? So if you teach Spanish, you can go to the Caribbean, and you can go to Central America, you can South America. You can even kind of go to Portugal and speak a little Spanish. The idea is that once you know Kubernetes, you can run it in a lot of different places. And Kubernetes, it doesn't have to be on Google Cloud, right? You can run it on your local laptop. So there's little barriers to learning Kubernetes, whether it's on the cloud or whether it's on your local laptop. The way you deal with it, it's the same language, and it works the same way. Yes, you don't get massive scaling on your laptop, but in most cases, if you want to run 5 microservices on your laptop on Kubernetes, it's the same experience than when you run it on, say, AKS.
So everybody runs it on their own laptop, all the students, I mean.
That's a great way to start.
Can you network all those laptops together? And I mean, you're all on a local network.
You can take it to the next level, where on your local laptop, you can have a virtual manager. There's Hyper-V, and there's VirtualBox. There's lots of virtual managers out there. On a Mac, I used to use Parallels. So on a Mac, I had Parallels, and then with Parallels, you could have multiple VMs, and each one of those VMs was a node. That worked out really well. But there's also really inexpensive cloud systems like DigitalOcean. Reason for Kubernetes, you really want good.
Writing YAML, yes.
Yeah. Welcome to YAML hell. It's
Dan, I think is, on the tour, I sat in one of his Kafka talks, which was yet another opportunity for me to learn that I'd rather be a developer than an ops person. It's like, I don't want to do this. This looks hard. This looks complicated.
Yeah, that always like that triggers me. So you just trigger me. That's awesome.
Yeah. I worry about Kubernetes in the same category, but I don't know. Maybe that's not true.
Yeah, some people will pigeonhole it and go like, it's a DevOps tool, and then we're like, that's a dev. That's not even dev ops tool. It's a dev ops tool, right? It is more of a like, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal.
I didn't want to deal with containers at all until test containers came along, and suddenly I'm like, ooh, I want to do this. I mean, I tried doing it once, but I got confused, and then I sat down with Raju, who knew all the stuff about it, and I showed him test containers once. And Raju Gandhi, just for those who don't know, is another no fluff speaker. Yeah, and he's got his book out, is the Head First Git book. So I hope that's doing well. Presumably it is. I really should read it. But at any rate, Dan says, wait a minute, where's Dan here? Me encanta Kubernetes. Yes. Of course, to show where I come from, I assumed it was pronounced Kubernetes the first time I saw the word, because I thought that would be the Greek, right? I don't know, but oh well. I sat down with Raju and showed him test containers, and he said, it's a Java API for Docker, I said, really? I mean, it's one way to think about it. But I remember the days back when we used to do like ESB tools and Mule and things like that. And even that was like, look, I don't trust any computer. I don't have access to the off switch on, that I don't have any way to pull the plug or whatever. And this was involving massive systems with lots of messages being passed around and going through different sets and everything. It sounds a lot like you're talking about that too. You're taking containers and deploying them on different cloud servers and coordinating them.
So you can run a RabbitMQ or a Nats or a Nats for messaging, PubSub messaging, or Kafka. There's lots of messaging and streaming applications that you can run on Kubernetes, and then have containers, or basically have your applications then post and pull things from streams and queues.
Yeah, the way I always heard it, the gag I always heard about containers was, I got this system and it works on my machine. It's like, okay, then we'll ship your machine. And thus containers were born,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm not trying to get you to convince me to use this. I just
No, no,
wondered
no.
what the use cases were and how it fit into the overall picture.
So
So you
one of the compelling ones is, being a Java developer, a lot of people are stuck on some version of Java,
mm,
6, 8, 11, right?
yeah.
Why isn't everybody running the stable one, which is 17, right? The
Or
nice thing about
21 in some
containers is that if you're on a team and you're in individual business units working on your individual applications that are eventually networked together onto a cloud system,
Uh-huh.
then those individual components all don't have to be running Java 8. You don't have to have a Java shop anymore, right? You can have some components that are Java 8, Java 11, Java 17, and it all depends upon who's writing what container, because the JRE is inside the container. Of course, then you get into Graal VM and all those great things about compiling native and
That's a whole different issue. So you basically you have a clean separation between the various containers, and therefore you can integrate them all,
right.
I
And the
guess.
key thing is you have now a clean separation between the individual developers
Mm,
in the teams
mm.
who are building the business applications.
So they really have
Really,
to write it in a modular fashion.
the biggest change for an environment, for a company that's using cloud native development, it's not necessarily the stack that's hard. It's converting over to teams that are now more high cohesive, low coupled to the other teams.
Mm.
The Melvin Conway law basically says, or as ThoughtWorks like or I think it was Martin Fowler said, the inverse Conway law maneuver or something like
Oh
that.
my goodness.
But basically, Conway's law is the way your teams communicate dictates your architecture.
Yeah.
Your
Companies ship
architect.
their
So
architecture, right?
if you want to fail with Kubernetes, what you do is you come into a monolithic team that has a JavaScript shop, a Java shop,
Right.
and an Oracle shop, and
Right.
say, hey, guess what, everybody? We're doing Kubernetes now. You will fail. What you have to have is teams that are built around the individual business components,
Ah,
and then they deliver those components independently on their own timelines, but collaborate and connect to each other on a distributed system, which you're like, oh, that sounds easy. Yeah, no, well, that's really, really hard.
yeah.
And companies will fail it. And then some companies will walk away from that and going, that's just too hard.
All right. Well, let's get
Yeah.
back to more of history here. So you spent time in that industry. You did a lot of that stuff. One thing I know, I remember you went out on your own. That wasn't that long ago. How long have you been on your own now?
Yeah. I mean, I start my LLC about 88 years ago, knowing that I was going to start doing more development and
It was 8
more,
years ago.
something like that. I was going to do more, got involved in QuickBooks and all those things. But
I had hair
eventually I
back
got to
then.
the point where I was like, yeah, I want to go independent now.
Uh-huh.
So thanks to Mark Richards and other folks that have encouraged me along that way. So
I
friends
was
and
in there
mentors,
too,
in
Yeah.
our fields. Yeah,
Yeah.
Nate as well, and Ken.
So
So,
how do you
and
like that?
also Raju, Dan, great. So thank you, Dan.
He's gone.
Um, oh,
He
there's
signed off. Yes.
something I said.
Never liked him anyway. It's okay.
Well, yeah. Well, now we can talk about him.
Yeah, exactly. So, what? How's it going? Like, what do you with
So I
that?
loved it, and I still love it, and I still am doing mostly. A lot of my time is spent with O'Reilly.
Mm,
They're because there's a lot to do there in terms of teaching, and like I said, I do a lot of my time teaching. I do consulting as well, independently. I do have a few clients I do independently. Occasionally, people will contact me, questions and things like that. And by the way, on my website, I have a contact link, and if you want to set up a Calendly session with me, I'd be happy to spend 20 minutes with you. Just
that's
talking
my
about
clue to run the
there you
banner.
go.
Yes, of course.
Um,
So,
and then I
go
ran
ahead.
into the latest chapter in my history right now is, and you're involved in that too. We'll get into that. Is one thing about the United States is that there's an insurance problem. So I was, based on my insurance needs and various complicated factors, one of the things I was looking at is like, okay, well, how am I going to get full-time insurance as an independent contractor?
Mm.
Well, there's the national health care. I was like, oh. So any issues with that. And I was spending a lot on healthcare. I was going to do as part of my independent work, I was going to do a cloud native class at my local university, which is Trinity College up in Hartford. And the reason I wanted to teach there was just for one class was because my dad went there as part of the World War II. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly his history there, because I think he was there, got drafted, went to the Philippines, came back 2 years later, thankfully, and finished up his time there, GI Bill. So I'm still actually picking up part of all of that history there. My dad has passed away. So it gives me great pleasure to teach where my dad taught. So I was just going to do one class there. And in August, they called me up and saying, we need actually another professor. Would you be interested in teaching some more courses? And I was like, well, what's in it for me? And they were like, how about some health insurance? Because I realized that there's actually a pretty good program to do that. So without compromising my independent architecture consulting arm of my business, I decided to take on it's an adjunct professor. So it's what do they call it? A visiting lecturer. So it's some of the way these universities work is they give you benefits with, you're not on the tenure track. And I'm not on a tenure
That's
track.
also a very broad definition of the word local. That's in your local university. That's a hike for you, isn't it?
It's an hour, up and back. So you don't want to forget your laptop, which I did one day.
Ooh, yeah. That
thankfully my wife met me halfway. She was very.
Oh, really? You don't have everything?
She drove all the way up because I was running out of time. So
you should have everything in the cloud, right?
Yeah, including my laptop, right? Exactly.
Yeah, right. So you are active there now. You're teaching how many classes?
So I did two courses that fall. And actually, no, I did one course that fall. And then last spring, I taught my cloud native course, as well as a database fundamentals course, which was, oddly enough, harder than I thought. Because, there's one thing to use databases, but to teach it to spry, young, dry sponges who want to know everything, it's challenging to do that if you haven't done it in years. And it's been a while since I've been in college. So, and frankly, the college course that I had on database was not to this level of in the syllabus. So it was challenging for me, which is exactly why I'm doing it, which is why I do everything I do in software, because it's fun and challenging.
Yeah, I know just enough SQL to get by. I know it for what I've had to do. And you have to know what's the saying is whatever technology you're using, you need to know at least one layer below. So if you use Spring Data, you need to know Hibernate. If you're using Hibernate, you really need to know the SQL, because you have to see what it's generating and you have to know what you're trying to accomplish. Otherwise, when things go wrong, you're in big trouble.
But to know SQL, you really have to know relational algebra.
And all I know is what third normal form is, and that's about as far as I go.
It's like that's what. Exactly.
Oh, here's a join table. Yes. Okay, I get it.
Foreign
keys in each direction. Yeah.
It's fun teaching because you have to go back to school yourself.
Yeah.
Quickly.
What did you do?
Go back in the fall, and then I'll teach another year there, and we'll see. We'll go from there.
In the cloud native one, did you actually teach them Kubernetes, or did you do something? You did.
Oh yeah, it was awesome. And you asked the question, it was like, what do you teach them on? It was weird. I do live sessions on O'Reilly, and it actually turned out in the syllabus that as I was doing the O'Reilly online talk, it was perfectly aligned in the syllabus. So I just had my students watch my O'Reilly talk, and then I gave them a quiz on it.
Good to reuse this stuff, I'll tell you.
Yeah. So, and O'Reilly, I worked out with something with them where I was able to get the students subscriptions for the semester, and they were able to get access to the books. And then O'Reilly has these great labs called you used to call them the Kata Coda labs. It's labs where you don't need to fire up a credit card on a cloud system or do a free student account. O'Reilly has labs that will spin up a moderate Kubernetes cluster for you, just 2 nodes, and you can play with containers and Docker and Kubernetes and other cloud native things, Redis and all the Kafka, RabbitMQ. You can do all this great stuff with all these labs and learn about different tools. Raju has done a lot of labs on the Git experience as well as Docker. So there's, tons of, for all the O'Reilly books up there, there's tons of labs up there, above over 1,000, 1,200 labs by now of various topics. So.
I mean, I used it a little bit when I was doing, with Spring related classes and things like that, except that the experience wasn't any really fundamentally different than running it on my local laptop, because I wasn't doing anything massively distributed or anything like that. It's all one machine. So in that case, it was just easier to share out my machine, or share out my screen anyway. And all the attendees did it on theirs. Now, we did have some kata kotas. Why don't we say something about kata kota? Because a lot of people don't even know what a kata kota is.
Well, they don't call it kata kota anymore. It actually got
they changed the name?
It was independent. It was invented by this guy named Ben Hall, a brilliant engineer, nice guy. He's out in the UK. And Ben basically was very successful with kata kota. And O'Reilly, because of the success, bought him. And then Ben was working there for a few years, supporting it. And I believe he's moved on. He's on to other, I'm sure, ventures. But it's now part of the O'Reilly subscription platform, and it's now called Labs, Interactive Learning Labs, which kind of makes sense.
What was the kata kota at all, though? I mean, just to give people an idea.
Oh yeah, it's the idea is like you're like, oh, I want to learn about this. You click on the little rectangle in a portal, and it will launch you into a virtual session right in your browser, where like on the left-hand side, it's kind of like a README in a Git repository. You're like, if you want to use this open source technology, read this README, right? And then you go through all the steps. You're like, okay, now I get it. So instead of doing that with a GitHub README, it fires up on the left-hand side the instructions, and then the right-hand side you get a modest bash terminal, and you start playing around with whatever you want to learn, Git or Docker or.
I guess the comparison would be to like Jupyter notebooks that they use in the Python world.
Yeah, there's some overlap there. The nice thing about it is not limited to a language, right?
Yeah,
it tends to be more Linux centric in terms of you're now in a terminal and you're on the command line, which some people using Macs are like, they're freaked out.
Really? The Mac people don't like that? I would have thought they would like it. Wow. Okay. I mean, I still use my terminal on a regular basis, even if I do it inside IntelliJ most of the time. But
yeah, it's something actually. It's just something I wrestle with my students, in being in college, is that try to get them away from using the mouse to click on icons on the desktop. So no, fire up the command line. You're going to need to learn this stuff.
That's your friend, yes. The problem, I guess, I would expect with students, it'd be the beginner problem of, sometimes you don't realize how many layers you've had to learn just to become a working professional. And I like to say it this way, that there are two challenges in teaching, one, or learning actually, just being an IT person, is that there's never enough time to learn everything you need to know. And the stuff you've already learned changes. So you spend your whole career prioritizing, what's worth your time and what's worth your energy. Ryan says a lot of workshop attendees I have no Linux CLI experience. I mean, if they're Windows people, I kind of get that. But of course, what I've heard from people like Neil Ford and stuff is that a lot of today's young people, they don't get what a file system is. They don't know what files and folders are or directories or any of that, because to them, everything is an app on a phone, Yeah. And I'm not sure how you make it to the point of being a developer when you don't know how to, like the classic I used to run into all the time, they didn't know how to set an environment variable.
Yeah.
No, you put this in your path. What does that mean? Well,
right. And there's a reason why there's no really good desktops for Linux. It's just not meant for that.
Yeah.
Linux, I do a lot of talking about cloud native. The Cloud Native Computing Foundation is a sub foundation of the Linux Foundation. So if you follow the money, that's the reason why Cloud Native is all CLI. So one of the first things I tell people if they're trying to learn Kubernetes, like, You need to know Linux. I'm sorry if you don't want to know it, but you really need to know it. And part of knowing Linux is not finding the best Ubuntu shell and desktop. It's breaking out the command line and getting into it. It doesn't have to be bash. You know, it could be fish shell, whatever.
I
But
use
you have to be,
Oh My Z Shell. Oh My Z Shell changed my life.
there you go. Yeah.
You do that too? I mean,
Yep.
just for the
That's
tab completion, that's what it's all about, man. I mean, the history is good too, but the tab completion with the plugins and stuff, I don't know how I live without all that now.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's hardly, you know, when I'm teaching these new students, you
Yeah.
know, Kubernetes, there's lots of layers I have to teach. And one of them is you need to get used to the command line. And some of these students are not even understanding, oh, Java is, you can put it in a jar file. What's a jar file? So
Yeah,
there's a lot of, like, you know, Neil Ford says about, they don't understand what files are sometimes. And it's like,
yeah. And some of them are, I mean, not just that. I've heard other people say, in addition to Neil and others, they point out that, you know, when people say, yeah, I don't want to be, you know, multi-language or whatever, that's too hard for me. I don't want to learn another language. They go, well, wait a minute, you're already using Java and JavaScript and CSS and SQL and, I mean, what else? I mean, bash commands and whatever. And it just, you don't realize how many layers you've already had to, I won't say master, but have to be comfortable with in order to get anywhere. I mean, and get, you know, source code control. I mean, I imagine that's completely new to most of them as well.
Right. You got Gradle, you got Maven.
Build tools now, right? That's another layer.
You got,
and of course, all these things change.
Jenkins,
Oh, the CI server. Right?
CI server, declarative manifests.
Oh my goodness.
Then you get into YAML hell. That's a language in itself.
Yeah, but
Docker
better
file.
to say that. It's better to say that when Dan's here. So he
Exactly.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm going to be involved. Basically that happened because, for those who are curious, you know, I taught before I began my career change from engineering to IT. When I was going to do that, back in the mid 90s, I taught a single class at Trinity in the engineering department. And I basically did it on my lunch hour, quote hour, is that I would go over 2 or 3 times a week. I forget what it was, and do my hour. I must have been 3 times a week, teach my hour of sophomore level dynamics, you know, which, you know, half of which I'd never taken. So that was an adventure, and then come back to work. And when I found out you were teaching at Trinity, I'm like, oh, I had such a pleasant experience because the people were charming. It's a liberal arts university with a good, strong science and engineering program. And the people, I guess, what was it described as? It was Yale, but less intense, you know, more chill, I think was probably the way they put it, you know? And I thought, oh, wow. And I heard you were there, so of course I wanted to come visit.
Well, not really. It was a great visit. I really appreciate it.
You know, I mean, but you were
the audience
exactly in my wheelhouse. You were talking about Spring apps using Gradle and all that. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can help that.
So just to share with the audience, I invited Ken in to speak to the class for one lecture, and he did a great job. And you had instant rapport with the students. It was wonderful to see them warm up to you. And in that one class, you taught them, you know, basically, you know, how to get started with Spring Boot and do a simple microservice, you know, simple. It actually had, you know, a database connection with it and everything. So they really appreciated that. And that's when you said to me, like, hey, I could teach here. Like, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, not to the point where I get benefits, you know, like some people. Yeah, but you know how it is when you're teaching. When you walk into a class, the ideal circumstance is that the students have already struggled with the material that you're about to teach them.
Yep.
So you don't have to even establish why you need to know this. They already need to know it. They're already like, how do I do this? I'm stuck. I'm having trouble. And you give them the answers and they are so happy. I mean, teaching in general is at least for me, a so much more pleasant occupation than being a developer. I mean, I like to say to people, you finish a development project, and if it went well, the clients are like, good, thank you, but can you add this? Can you add that? Can you do this? Can you change this around? Whereas if you finish a class, a teaching course, a training class, they're like, oh, cool. Now I can do something I couldn't do before. I mean, it's still bigger than I needed, but hey, I did that and it had a deadline. I'm over now. You know, we can all go home, you know.
Yep.
Unlike development projects, when they're like, yeah, we need to keep you on for another couple of weeks of 80-hour, whatever, you know, it's just such a fun profession. Well, when you had me in there, you had primed the ground with a bunch of problems they needed to solve that they needed help with.
And I'm so glad you were there, because how you taught it would have been different than mine. And you saved my day.
Well,
so thank you.
I'm figuring I'm doing this Java class in the fall. If we, by some weird fluke, wind up having to get into cloud native anything, well, I'm not doing the Kubernetes stuff. You'll be able to step in on that, you know?
Right. So I have to do a plug to Nate Schuda as well, who you've had on last, that was 2 weeks
Wait a
ago.
minute. I still have this from last time. You ready? How about that?
There you go. Nate Schuda, right?
Yeah,
So
NC
Nate,
Schuda.
also, a professor. So he teaches cloud native, basically development to graduates at his university,
Minnesota.
University of Minnesota.
Yeah.
And so as a guest lecturer, I've helped him out, and I'm sure that if you wanted to help Nate, Ken, he would rope you in.
Well,
so we do a lot of bartering and trading here, and so I'm now in deficit. Now I owe Ken a lecture class as soon as he does it. So
no, it was so much fun coming in there because they were so eager and they were very bright. I was very pleased, you know.
Yeah,
they picked things up very quickly. No, Nate, by the way, has an excellent job title. Do you know what job title he went by?
Oh, it's wonderful. Yes.
Yeah, he was architect as a service.
That's
right?
great.
Whereas you were going to call yourself, what were you going to say?
Oh, I don't know. Software,
I thought it was something related to that. You know, I did see someone suggest they were developer as a service, but that seems kind of, I mean, aren't we all, right? You know,
as soon as I come up with a clever title like that, I will promote it. But
Neil's, you know what Neil's job title was for many years? Neil Ford.
Forget.
I think it may still be on his business cards, although I don't know the last time I gave out a business card.
What was it?
He was a meme wrangler.
That's it.
And that's back when he still had to explain to everybody what a meme was.
The meme was, right.
You know, now it's just part of the air we breathe, you know. There was that one. So, you know, job titles, that can be kind of cool. An opportunity for creativity. It's like another opportunity. It's like naming machines. You know, I'm always sad when somebody joins the network and the name of their machine is, you know, Bob's laptop. And I'm like, oh, come on. You know, this was your one chance, you know,
exactly.
Do something clever. In my house.
Why isn't it Frodo?
What do you have?
Why isn't your machine named Frodo or something?
Yeah, right. Originally in my house, we went with, I had a Babylon 5 and a Narn and a Centauri. And of course the server was Zahadum, because if you go to Zahadum, you will die. You know, that was the bad one. Then I used those up and I started moving to planets. So I had in fact, I have an iPad now. I finally bought an iPad. First time. I never had an iPad before. And it's named Pluto. And the best part about it is I think it's under one of the menus in Chrome, you know, that you can move your window over to another platform and it says move to Pluto. And that was an unexpected benefit. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. You know, I want to move a window over to Pluto.
And the joke would be, I tried it, but the latency was too long.
Yeah, I mean, right, exactly. The latency was a problem. It was a little cold too. Right, you know, which probably welcome down in Texas. I remember when I was a grad student, we were still basically on Sun workstations back then.
Sure.
And there was several of them that were little more than dumb terminals. They had power, but they were tied to a server. Yep. And the best part was the naming convention is that the individual workstations were called chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, etc. And the server was called ice cream. Because of course it was an ice cream server. you know, and I thought, oh, that was great. Somebody told me there was a rum raisin somewhere around campus somewhere. You know, I mean,
Rocky Road.
it's such an opportunity to come up with clever, you know, creative things and all that. And I'm always sad when it says, oh yeah, this is Bob's laptop. It's like, oh, come on, you know.
Right.
So my current laptop, I think, is called Babylon 5 because the original Babylon 5 I had is long gone. I did have an NCC 1701 for a while. None of this A, B, C, or D, or E, or you know, whatever. You know.
Right.
You have any good ones, or no? You're one of those boring people.
I'm more of, if I did a renaming right now, it'd probably be more toward the. I love the remake of the Battlestar Galactica. So the recent one. That's actually, I was reading Sam Newman's book, Building Microservices, watching the Netflix, you know, Battlestar Galactica, and
it's on Netflix, because I never watched it, and I wondered what cloud provider is it on.
I don't know if they've taken it off since, because I know they have to shuffle things around, but it was on there for a long time. I haven't checked lately, but yeah, I watched the whole series on it, and that's when I was learning Kubernetes. I was like, oh, which gets back to, here's an architectural question for you. So I don't know if did you watch that series, like the remake of it? No, so
not yet. No, that's what I was thinking. I was going to look for it.
All right. So the spoiler alert, what was the demise of the Cylons in the Battlestar Galactica? I don't know if so the storyline behind it is like they had a resurrection ship.
I watched the early Battlestar. I watched Battlestar Galactica in the 70s. Okay.
Right. I couldn't watch that. Lauren Green, I couldn't do all that. I don't know. It was just too weird and cute to me.
I watched it until it got boring, because it got boring fast. That was the sad part.
Yeah.
My sister,
I love the remake of it, and great new concept. And
okay,
I'm sorry they're not doing more with it. Anyways, the downside of the Cylons was that they had a resurrection ship.
Oh.
And the resurrection ship is when, you kill a Cylon. Didn't really matter, because they would just get recloned. And the data would be still intact, because the resurrection ship, right?
So kind of a
new Cylon would be created, right? So, and in fact, if you look at Kubernetes, when you run a container and you're inside of a pod, these pods are like little Cylons. You can spin up 1,000 pods, and you got an army to do, loan processing or machine learning or whatever application you want to do. So, what's the downside? What is your single point of failure for Kubernetes? Well, if you put all of your resurrection ship into one place, and in Kubernetes, it's called etcd. So it's a distributed database, key value store database, right? In high production systems that are secure, that etcd cluster is distributed, right? So in Battlestar Galactica, they had a resurrection ship, but there was only one. So
single point of failure.
Single point of failure. And either the right way of doing it would be replication with a RAF consensus algorithm. And of course, the true reproduction or fault tolerance would be have a resurrection ship in another universe. And that would truly be fault tolerant.
Good luck with that. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we're not going to get into another multiverse, are we here?
Well, now that AI is watching all these videos and learning, they will never make that mistake.
So I, for one, welcome our new AI overlords. Yeah. Let's just finish up with a few,
Boy, that was a geek out there. That was great.
So just a couple of, silly little questions, like, let's cause some problems. Tabs or spaces?
Spaces. I'm really adamant about that.
Yeah. See, book authors tend to go for spaces as well, because tabs get all messed up when you put something inside of a document, many times. So you don't know what the tabs are going to be. My favorite is to be able to hit the tab key and have it insert spaces, like most IDEs will do these days.
Yes. Right.
So that works out.
The reason is because editors can't handle tabs.
Yeah.
The whole idea behind it is that you could adjust the tab settings.
Right. How about, speaking of editors, Emacs, VI, where did you fit on that scale?
Yeah, I can get out of VI. I don't have to, I do know how to get out of that joke.
I have one joke for VI and one for Emacs. So
I don't know the one for Emacs for you.
Oh yeah, well the VI joke right? Is I've been a VI user for 3 years, mostly because I can't get out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the Emacs joke is try this on Neil, by the way. Emacs is a wonderful operating system lacking only a decent editor. You know, you can
Yes,
try that one on
that is a good
there.
one.
I mean, I used Emacs in the 90s, you know, like everybody did. It's just there's been progress, you know. I guess
You know,
Mac
you
or
know what I'm
Windows,
partial to?
pardon me?
You know what I'm partial to?
What's that?
WordStar.
Oh my God, my father, to the day he died, he remembered his memorized WordStar commands.
They're still in my head. All the hotkeys for WordStar. My development experience was BASIC and Fortran and assembly language 8088, 8086 on a Zenith Z100 and Z89 computers
Oh,
using CPM WordStar. That's how you
WordStar.
edited the files.
Yeah, he loved his little keyboard shortcuts for that thing. He was so sad when they didn't make it.
Oddly
Yeah.
enough, they were very close to what they are now.
Really?
Look
Are
at the
they?
hotkeys
So
on
they
it.
established a lot of the conventions, you're saying, basically.
Control S, things like that. Yeah, yeah. For
Yeah.
save, yeah, files.
Right. You know, I remember being really mad when, I mean, because I got dragged kicking and screaming into the Windows world. I didn't want to go into Windows.
Mm.
My undergrad and grad, I didn't have anything really undergrad, but grad student, we had access to Unix. You know, I don't remember which flavor of Unix, but Linux was shiny and new. I don't think anybody adopted that yet, but there was Unix. And I couldn't believe when Windows said, oh, yeah, the copy command is Control C. And I'm like, no. You don't do Control C. That's to kill a process. What are you doing? You know, but that was Bill Gates and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But so did you?
Yeah, my regret early in my career is that I didn't get on board with Linux early enough.
Really?
I ignored it too long.
Mm.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I installed Linux, I was at the research center and I put it on my home laptop because for the first time in my life, I had root access to a machine. You know, I mean, I was in the engineering team. I never had root access even to these powerful workstations I was working on. We had to go to an IT person to make any significant
Right.
change or even to install anything good, you know?
Yeah,
It's like I was so annoyed. I wanted root access. So I installed, I think it was Red Hat, because that was the one everybody installed back then, you know? And the problem was I had to relearn everything again, you know? And then of course it all changed. And every time you did an upgrade, a lot of it changed again. I couldn't get the printer to work, couldn't get the scanner to work. You know, now of course that's much, much simpler, but now I'm on a Mac. So it's kind of resting on Linux anyway, sort of.
Anyways, so
Yeah.
that's why I think a lot of people, developers gravitated toward the Mac, is because it's just basically Linux underneath. So,
and I'm not giving up IntelliJ, and I'm not giving up IntelliJ with not the AI assistant. I mean, just to bring this back to where we started, I'm not overly fond of it yet. Although the one thing the AI assistant does that I think I'm going to take advantage of is it will write commit messages for you. Do you know that? Yeah, it'll say, oh, these are the files that were changed and this is what you're trying to accomplish. It'll give you this huge detailed commit message. I'm like, okay, I could live with that. You know, it's supposed to write documentation for you as also, but I think what they mean by that is that if you start a Java doc commit or command, it'll fill out that with all the params and the methods.
Release notes.
And I don't really need that very often. So I don't know how often I use that. But GitHub Copilot, I'm not giving that up. Yeah,
that's wonderful.
That's even though it's wrong a lot, it's right a lot more.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's really useful for me. Have you seen the GitHub Copilot X project?
No. That's good.
Yeah. This is something that's the future, supposedly. It's a whole bunch of affiliated projects at GitHub that they're eventually merging in.
Good.
And I've used a couple of them. I'm on the waiting list for a couple others. But for example, I have a repository visualizer. If you look at my Makito book repository, so that's at github.com/KOUSEN, my last name, /Makito book. You know, so it's not even called Makito Made Clear. The repo is named before the book was. So it's Makito book. Then one thing I have in there that's triggered by a GitHub action is what they call the repo visualizer. And it shows circles indicating how the repository is organized, how many classes under source main Java, source test Java, others, and they surround them in various packages. And I again, not sure how useful it is, but it's kind of a neat thing, you know, in general.
Especially if you get it for free, it's just there.
Yeah, right. And
look at
I
it,
didn't have to do anything. I had to put in the GitHub action. and they told me exactly what to put in, and it generates the diagram every time you do a commit, apparently. And I'm not talking about a repo with 10,000 classes in it. It's not huge there.
Yeah.
But I do recommend taking a look at that. I'll have to bring that up in a future one. I'm doing a talk at UberConf on AI tools for Java developers, and I'll bring up the GitHub Copilot X project.
Nicely done.
And it's not exactly a hard sell. Jay Zimmerman wants to jump on the AI bandwagon as much as anybody does. I didn't tell you. I got an email from somebody at Manning saying, "Hey, I saw you're giving this talk at UberConf. You want to write a book on AI tools for Java developers?" And I'm like, can you imagine a book that would be more obsolete as soon as it was published?
Yeah.
I mean, at the pace things are changing now,
it's a moving
target. It'll be more of a here are the ideas and then how to use it. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And it'll be obsolete as soon
exactly.
Yep. Like, oh my goodness.
Right.
Well, any last
well, you and I are both doing video courses for O'Reilly.
Right,
I want to mention that.
I'm updating my spring boot course, right? And
right.
I'm
doing the Kubernetes course for them as well.
Figured.
So that'll be out in a couple months. So
I don't know what the schedule is for mine.
Yeah, I mean, we do the live training.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about these videos is that you can log in, and it's part of the subscription. You get it anytime you want. So that's good.
And that's found money, by the way. That's you wake up in the morning, you find out every month you find out what the royalties are.
Exactly.
You don't have to do anything else on it. I mean, it could be $5, but it's hey, I found $5.
Right. Pay for my coffee.
I liked it better when I went to a recording studio, but now that I have a YouTube channel, I guess I have to push that again.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, where's that? Here we go. Show. There we go. Tales from the Jar Side YouTube channel.
Always curious about the tools you're using, like when you're recording those studios, what the video processing you're using for it.
I use ScreenFlow is the best tool I've ever had for capturing your screen.
Sure.
So it really does capture it, and you could do all kinds of stuff with it. The one I've been using lately, especially for shorts, is called Descript. That DE.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Description.
You just showed that to me the other day. Wow.
Yeah. That one allows you to edit the text and thereby edit the video. It also has the AI overdub capability where you could have it narrate whatever text you wrote in using either a built-in voice, or if you pay for the higher plan, you could get it to train on your voice, which I did.
Right.
So I have a couple of lines in there on that. I haven't really taken advantage of that too much yet, but that's
it's funny. It's like, as software developers, you're very used to like, take this tool, take this tool, take this tool. And we're very used to like duct taping them together to come up with
this. The logo up here, of course, you see that was created using Canva, as well as that little intro I did. So I've been using Canva a lot, and that's pretty good. That has its own recording mechanism too. The problem is none of them does everything. They all do certain things well.
I agree.
So it's yet another integration problem, like we always have.
Yep. Yeah.
I made this little thing too. There's my QR code I generated in Canva, which points to the YouTube channel.
Right. Did he have the option of putting the logo in the middle? You got to put the logo in the middle.
In the middle of what?
In the middle of the QR code. That's the thing.
Yeah. See, there were QR codes that were fancier, but they wanted money.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to pay any money. I wanted it all to be free. I mean, I already paid for it. That's the problem with the AI stuff, by the way. That's my biggest problem with all this AI stuff. Everything is a subscription. Everything. Yep. They all want to get paid with that sweet, sweet subscription money. And eventually you just run out of subscriptions you can afford. It's like, this is ridiculous.
Good.
But at any rate, I've got those. Any last questions, comments, words of wisdom? Heard any good jokes lately? Oh, I told you my ChatGPT joke, didn't I?
Yes, that was. Wait, no, did you? No, you didn't do that. Maybe you did it during Nate's session. No.
ChatGPT walks into a bar. Yes, bartender says, "What do you have?" ChatGPT says, "What's everybody else having?" Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. I have this ready. Just a second.
I know. And you did that in the last one, and Nate's reaction was the same as mine.
There you go.
Oh, now it works. Okay.
The rim shot here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I downloaded it so I could play it locally, but it takes long to start up. There we go.
There it is.
Yeah. All right. So there's that. Any last things, anything you want to bring up or anything that you're doing in the future that you want to mention or anything coming up?
Things I'm going to do in the future. My immediate future, I'm pulling the diesel engine out of my sailboat and I'm putting electrical engine in.
On purpose?
And I'm doing it myself and I'm doing it on purpose.
Oh,
that's part of my contributions for the carbon footprint.
Yeah, I hired.
Really, it's because I'm tired of having a diesel engine that doesn't work.
So it's going to be pure electric then?
Pure electric.
That ought to be interesting, actually.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And thanks to YouTube and the sailing community, there's lots of, how to do it yourself.
Very good. So, well, we'll have to check in with you and find out the progress that's going on that.
And homage to, was it John Goodenough? Did you hear about that?
Goodenough?
You know about John Goodenough?
That name sounds familiar.
He just passed away, and he is noted in his obituary for inventing lithium batteries.
Oh, right. I did see that go by. Yeah, the creator of lithium batteries, and boy, isn't that a whole industry now?
And of course, the joke there is, well, it's not really good enough. We need something better than lithium, right? So
yeah, right. Wow.
Right. I'm surprised you didn't pick up on that opportunity for a joke.
That one is like, that's fish in a barrel. That's too obvious. Right. I mean, I'm going to let that one ride. So, okay. I will tell everybody once again to get in touch with you. Your website is dujour.com. Dujour with a J, so I got that ticker on there. I'll say to the people who are listening or who watch this later, thank you very much for coming. The plan is to try to keep the live streams going every other week, so that it's just too hard to schedule anything more frequent than that. We'll see how it goes. Next week, I'm supposed to be in Crete, of all places, at J Crete. So I'm going to I really went about that the wrong way. I said to my wife, so you want to go to the Mediterranean in July? Yeah, that was a hard sell. So obviously we're going. So I'll let you know when I get back. And at which point I'm going to need your help setting up the Trinity class.
Oh, yes. So Ken and I are going to be together in the fall, sharing lunch with each other. It'd be nice. It would be good to see you.
So thank you very much for coming on the live stream. And
I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I only hope that you will be charitable enough to invite me back. And I will definitely say
thanks, Ryan, for being here. That was very kind of you. It's good to see Ryan. It's been a while since we've gotten together.
You got to get Dan on. Dan's like, talk about entertainment factor. Get Dan on and your clicks will go up.
It's in the plan. It's in the plan. As he says, we're saving the best for last,
Yeah.
Okay.
Creme de la creme.
Okay. So take care, everybody. Thanks for coming. Good night.